what I often see is that it's not that organizations lack vision, it's that among the leadership team and the owner, there are slightly different versions of the vision. And part of the exercise here is to get one version that everybody can align on.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Borders, and I'm your host, Andrew Fahey. And within this podcast, we look at the exciting world of taking your business globally. And we do this by speaking to some of the best and brightest minds in their fields, either people that have led businesses and taken them globally, service providers that support this industry and help us with our global expansion, or sometimes just some pretty cool people with experiences that we can all learn from. And today we're going to look at business operating system models, and in particular EOS. And to do that, I've got a very special guest all the way from Washington, DC, which is Sam Bryson. Sam, welcome to Beyond Borders.
Andrew, thank you so much. Glad to be with you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. And full disclosure, Sam and I have worked together in a previous life, and now we're both doing separate things, and it's great to be able to reconnect and understand a little bit more. So let's start things off nice and easy for people. Just give people an overview of your background, really explain your career. How did you end up here today in this seat?
Sure thing, Andrew. Happy to do that. So I have been working in the entrepreneurial arena with owners and leadership teams really since the start of my career, which started in China, of all places. After university, I moved there to have a bit of an adventure, and I ended up working for an entrepreneur there, an American who had started businesses in the textiles industry. He then started a tech business, did a little bit of everything. So as you can imagine, it was a great introduction to the world of entrepreneurship, the world of global business. And we worked with clients domestically as well as internationally. And after leaving that business, coming back to the United States, I worked for some larger firms. I went to graduate school. Through that time, I really determined that small business and the entrepreneurial arena was where I wanted to spend my career. So that's what I've been doing ever since then in various industries: telecommunications, human capital, real estate. And in about 2019, I joined the leadership team of a firm that was implementing EOS and got to see firsthand the power of the system and how it worked. I was leading one of the divisions, and we had a tough time getting alignment with the owner. We were underperforming. We had a lot of issues, and EOS really helped us transform that business. We went from being sort of the unwanted part of the portfolio to being a nationally ranked company, number 4 in the nation within just 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Thanks in large part to what EOS was able to do for us. And about a year ago, after we worked together, it was time for me to take the next step in my entrepreneurial journey. So I decided...
They're unrelated, by the way. It wasn't the fact that Sam worked with me. He's like...
completely unrelated. And decided that what I wanted to do was share EOS with other business owners and their leadership teams. And the best way for me to do that was to do what I'm doing now, to be an EOS implementer and get to work teaching the tools to people like that. So, and that's how I got here.
Excellent. Well, huge varied experience, and I'm sure we'll come to learn throughout today that really equips you well for this. And we've mentioned EOS a few times now. For those who aren't familiar, either in operating models or EOS in particular, it'd just be great for you to bring that alive for people and what actually is EOS.
For sure. So the way I describe EOS, it's a set of tools, a complete system, as well as a process that helps growth-oriented leadership teams do 3 things. First, get them crystal clear, 100% on the same page with their vision, so where their organization is going, how it's going to get there. Second, it helps those teams and their organization gain traction on that vision by instilling discipline and accountability throughout the organization. And then the third thing it does is that it helps to create a cohesive, healthy team in the business, that team that I know you've been a part of before, the kind of team that holds each other accountable, that isn't afraid to leave anything under the table or not said, calls it out in the spirit of the greater good of the organization. So those are the three things that it helps
Mhm.
people do. And the core of EOS is the EOS model. And that model was created based on the founder of EOS and his practical real world experience working with entrepreneurs and their leadership teams. And that experience uncovered that really no matter what country or industry you're operating in, what kind of business customers you serve, in every business, you need to be really good at six things in order to achieve your goals. And in EOS, we call them the six key components of your business. Just to run through them real quick for everybody to try to bring it a little bit more to life. First is the vision component. So, where your organization is going, how it's going to get there. Got to be really clear on that. And everyone in the organization has to be clear on it as well. Second is the people component. You can't achieve a great vision without great people. And in the people component, we help organizations with tools that help them attract and retain the people who are great for their unique organization. Because great people is kind of a generic term, and every organization is different. The third is the data component. So that's where we help organizations make sure that they're running their business based on objective facts and information, and they're avoiding the pitfalls of going with emotions, egos, opinions that can sometimes filter into the decision-making process. Fourth component is the issues component. So every business has issues. Sometimes those are problems. Sometimes those are opportunities you can take advantage of. But what makes great businesses great is they're great at calling the issues out for what they are at the root and then having the courage to solve them and make them go away
Yeah.
forever. So you got to be really good at that. Fifth component is the process component. So that's how to get the most important work in your organization done the right and best way every time, creating that scalability and repeatability that you're looking for when you're growing. And then finally, the sixth key component is the traction component. So those are tools that help you take that high level vision you're aligned on, bring it down to ground level, execute with discipline and accountability. And I know I covered
Okay.
a lot there.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, no. Really interesting. I guess the name, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, this is some, and forgive me if this is the silly question, but the connotation of an entrepreneur, somebody that's just started this off and at the start of the journey, and sort of this actually feels like it works for fully fledged, large, successful businesses, even sort of a business that started on its sort of geographical expansion journey as well. Could EOS work for companies in that global expansion journey?
when I think about that journey and the way I've seen it done in my past, one of the first things that comes to mind is the challenge of creating and nurturing connection across borders.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think that's what most companies are trying to do when they expand internationally, because those connections, when they're strong and they're right, that's what enables truly seamless global solutions for clients and customers. And oftentimes, that's what you're advertising you can do. And what I've realized about EOS is that fundamentally, it's a system for managing human energy, for helping teams get and stay aligned, all rowing in the same direction, if you'd like that analogy. And that's really important because, in my experience, that's where the magic happens. That's where the organization becomes more than just the sum of its parts, when good companies become truly great. And so when businesses expand into new countries, I think of EOS as a simple, practical way to create that environment, sort of like the glue that holds that expanding tapestry of your company together.
I like that. I like that a lot. So a whole range of different sides of business, and I think you and I were part of a patchwork of different businesses coming together. I can, as you were speaking there, I was thinking, well, we could have really benefited from some of those components that would have helped with some of the alignments, some of the communication. So that sounds really exciting. Okay, Sam, I think I'm understanding EOS. I'm definitely understanding the value and how that can be overlaid and useful in a global expansion strategy as well. But what are some of the sort of key strategic elements that can help businesses prepare for entering new markets within EOS?
Yeah. I'll go back to the vision component that I talked about earlier. So when I think about strategic planning, I think about making sure we're planful, but making sure we're not overly rigid, and also that we're not too complex as we think about where we're going. So in the vision component, we ask folks who are participating in the EOS process to answer 8 questions, and those 8 questions formulate a very simple but entrepreneurial approach to strategic planning that I think helps, especially as you're considering these big decisions about going across borders. So I'll just highlight very quickly for you those 8 questions so people have a sense of what
Yeah.
that is. So first is, what are the organization's core values? And while that may not sound right off the bat like a strategic planning question, ultimately knowing who you are as an organization and what you expect from your culture is an important bit of context as you set your plans going forward.
Yeah.
The second key question, what is your core focus? So what is your sweet spot in the marketplace that you do best, better than anybody else? Really knowing that and having the discipline to stay laser focused on it. The third key question, what is your 10-year target, or what is your long-term business goal?
Okay.
Usually simply expressed, just helps create a North Star.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth question is, what's your marketing strategy? So who is it that you should talk to, and what is it that you should say to that audience in order to convince them that your product or service is right for them? So those first 4 questions are very high level, but they help set important context.
Yeah.
The fifth key question we ask, what's your 3-year picture? So thinking about that North Star, thinking about that context, what does your organization need to look like just 3 short years from now? And we're not going for a long 20-page strategic planning document here. This is a quick set of 5 to 15 bullets with some measurables. Again,
Okay.
but the idea, crystallize where you're going.
Yeah.
Then bring it even farther and closer to ground level. What's your 1-year plan? So where you need to be in 12 months. Within that 1 year, what are your quarterly priorities? And then finally, what are your issues? What are the long-term issues that you're not prioritizing this quarter, but you know you need to get to eventually?
Yeah.
Ultimately, when we answer those questions, we get to a quick 2-page summary of the strategic plan that gets everybody on the same page, but also does it in a way that allows you to make sure you can focus on the business. This is not a 2 or 3 month exercise.
Yeah. And Sam, listening to you talk through that, a lot of that stuff business leaders are going to do intuitively, and I guess that's what you're trying to do, where there are owner managers who've been running businesses, it's just been in their head and it just feels naturally to them. This creates a framework to allow that to exist outside of those people. Is that probably a fair way of explaining it as well?
A very fair way. What I often see is that it's not that organizations lack vision, it's that among the leadership team and the owner, there are slightly different versions of the vision. And part of the exercise here is to get one version that everybody can align on.
Yeah, and I like that. And I guess dovetail to that, so having the people facing in the right direction, clear where if you don't know how to start, if you don't know where ultimately you're heading, and then nice measurable chunks to do that on the way. Especially when we talk about the concept of global expansion, you introduce that pesky variable of people into it then as well, which and we all have different quirks and ways and cultural alignment. And does EOS help with that side of it as well?
For sure. I talked earlier about the core values, and I think that concept is going to be familiar to your audience. It's a fairly well-known business term at this point. And what I've seen in the past is that those core values, they often end up on a wall if you're in a physical office, or perhaps they're on a website, but they sometimes struggle to come alive in your organization to help drive your culture. And I talked about the people component in EOS earlier. One of the things we teach is how to get right people, or people that share your core values. And there's a very simple tool that we use called the People Analyzer that is designed to make sure that organizations define their core values, but then they're hiring, firing, reviewing, rewarding, recognizing people based on those core values, and that it's done in a simple black and white way. And that's what takes those core values and that sort of generic high level term of culture and helps actually bring it alive in the organization and helps people feel it and touch it in a way
Yeah.
that without those tools doesn't always happen. And as you
Uh,
work across borders, helps
yeah.
to be clear about what that is.
I really like that approach. At various times in my career, leading businesses, you get to a stage as you grow where you feel that's naturally being watered down. We're hiring too many people, it's too broad, that we're losing our identity. And I've sort of probably made the mistake of then inserting myself into the final process of saying, well, actually, because it's sort of so intuitive to me, I'll be there to do that. And when you think about this, that just can't scale at all. And this is a sort of way of trying to get that DNA imprint and making it something that multiple people can do. And especially when you're sort of then talking about expanding into global markets, different people can actually start to create that identity in different regions as well. I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. Okay, so there's sort of the strategic elements, we've got the cultural elements. One of the things at Briars that we're heavily involved on is operational delivery. So people come to Briars when they expand into different regions, so we can run the accounting function for them, HR, legal, the payroll, the whole back office element. Does it? Because it's really hard to generate efficiencies when you're expanding globally as well. In fact, by the very nature, you are duplicating everything because you've got a UK version and a US version and a Canadian version. Does EOS help with that operational efficiency as well?
We do. I mentioned the process component earlier, and process is that thing that you have to get right to create the scalability you were talking about. And process is also, I think, a fraught topic for a lot of people. Sometimes you say it and their eyes just glaze right over. And I've certainly seen that in my past as well. And the other thing I think people think of when they think of process is one of those big 750-page glossy binders that gets handed out and people put on their shelf and
You put it on the shelf
up.
just under the company values file that never got opened as well that you talked about before. I think that's what usually happens.
I've seen it. I've definitely seen it. So our approach to process, which is essential, is a little bit different, a little more entrepreneurial. EOS teaches clients that there's a set of core processes that run their business, and it's not every process in the business. It's usually just a handful of what is the processes that make the business truly run. So we align on what those are, and then we take an entrepreneurial approach to documenting them. So we're looking for the 20% of the steps that get you 80% of the result. That usually lets you keep your process documentation to a couple pages, not a 750-page binder. And then we teach a tool or a discipline we call followed by all. So that is, once you've agreed on those core processes, you've got them documented in that way. Followed by all is the mechanism for making sure that people are trained on the core processes and also that they're measured and managed in order so that they complete those core processes the correct way every single time. And I know it sounds high level, but it's a very, I think, effective way that resonates with people on a topic that people normally just don't want to touch because they think of it in that way.
Yeah, no, I've definitely experienced that as well. Okay. Now, that's a really useful overview for people listening. Strategic planning elements, there's cultural elements to it, and there is sort of operational efficiency elements as well. And it's for taking things out of people's heads like mine and actually creating a scalable process that allows you to actually hire great talent around you and allow them to be part of the solution rather than just all sat around trying to see what's inside your mind, really. That an okay recap?
You highlighted it brilliantly, as I expected.
Awesome. I guess a lot of the subscribers and people that listen to Beyond Borders do so because they're interested in the learning from other people that go before. And humans are a little bit weird, aren't we? We actually want to hear about the things that didn't go well more than we did of the things that did go well. So I always like to ask people the questions in the other way around. Have you ever ever implemented EOS badly, where it just didn't go right, or where somebody just didn't get the concept of it? And we'll clearly do the converse in a second, but it's just good to know of where did stuff not go to plan, because it happens a lot.
Sure. I'm smiling because, the memories are very strong. So I'm glad you asked this question. One thing I've noticed, and I'd be curious to your experience as well, like in my entrepreneurial journey, it's normal to experience failure alongside of
Mhm.
success.
Yeah.
And oftentimes failure is the greatest teacher, that you learn more from the failures than you do from the successes. And so one that comes to mind for me, right? EOS, as hopefully the audience is getting a sense of, EOS is fundamentally about growth. And in order to grow, business owners, leadership teams, they have to let go of some things. And in EOS, the language we use there is we call it delegating and elevating to their sort of genetic encoding, or the thing that they're best at, better than anybody else. And
Mhm.
when I was smiling earlier, I was thinking of a business owner who said all the right things about wanting to grow, got started on the EOS journey, but ultimately at her core, she really loved being what we call head waiter, chief cook, bottle washer in the restaurant,
Yeah.
fighting fires, being involved in every aspect of the company. And as that became more and more clear, it also became more and more clear that EOS was not going to help her get where she wanted to go. And so I talked about the marketing strategy earlier, right? When we're talking about EOS with people, the psychographic profile of people who get the most out of it are people who they're frustrated with the fact that they're fighting all the fires and they're in the middle of everything and the business is running them. And
Yeah.
so when that fit isn't there, ultimately it doesn't go the way you think it's going to go.
And I imagine in that scenario, it can be quite disheartening for the management team that are trying to gain empowerment as this as well, because I imagine that you can sort of visualize a room of people with the original founder and entrepreneur in the middle and this great team of people thinking, I could really help it, just like go the reins a little bit and sort of pass some of this on. And I suppose starting the journey and not finishing is almost worse than not starting it, because it gave you a little bit of hope. So I guess that's probably a bit, maybe the management team become more disincentivized by thinking this was going to help rather than it not starting yet, I guess is where I'm getting to.
That resonates for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And to your point, I think it's very scary. Like it's normal to be scared about letting go. That's
Well,
not
it's
an
your
yeah,
identity. You have lived with the business idea before it happened. You then brought it to life. You've nurtured it. It's become successful. There is no break in that identity. We see it quite a lot in the first round of private equity investments, where original founders have not quite grasped the change that happens when the first series of investment comes in, and they still want to behave how they did before, still want to make a lot of the decisions. And actually, you've made a fundamental change to the business. It's natural. It's hard to let go of some of this stuff.
yeah. And you summarized it well.
Okay, so to be fair, let's talk about the positive side of this then. So it'd be great to hear a sort of couple of examples, some snapshots of just where this was really needed, and where it really benefited the organization and the people within those.
For sure. Also, I was glad you asked the last question, but I'm also glad you asked this question. Even though failure is such a good teacher, sometimes it's painful to go back to
Yeah,
those
yeah,
experiences, and it's nice to turn the page to a happy memory. So, I mentioned earlier in my introduction, I talked about some of my EOS experience, and at the company that I worked at and talked about in my intro, one of the things that became very clear within 30 days was that we had a massive issue with the leadership team. That after we clarified where we wanted to go and that became more clear, then the people that we had on the bus were not the people that were going to take us there. And these were folks who had pretty key roles in the organization. So we're talking head of HR, head of finance, head of operations, folks who had meaningfully contributed to where the company had gotten, but ultimately weren't the people who were going to take it to the next level. And I had to work through that transition in a very challenging time. So this was during COVID. There was a lot of other things going on, but
Yeah.
ultimately we had to act in the spirit of the greater good. And I remember going through those conversations, anticipating a lot of difficult conflict. And as a result of the tools and the way that we taught, I talked about People Analyzer earlier, some of those conversations ended in a very respectful way that allowed us to minimize business disruption and move on to the next set of leaders. And I will never forget one conversation I had with a particular someone who really could have made our lives very, very difficult. Who, after the conversation, openly acknowledged to me that they realized they were not the person to take us to the next level, and they wanted to talk about next steps and what that looked like. And that just a lot of that was due to the tools that EOS taught us and we implemented. And it just resonated with me, a much more healthy way to have those conversations than maybe other people have experienced.
Yeah. I think that's really useful. I guess, listening to you talk then as well, it's hard not to sort of overlay this to your own personal circumstances as well. And one of the things that I suddenly was thinking, actually, this would be not just for entrepreneurs, but anybody that's in that sort of initial private equity cycle where they're on a journey of management teams progressing and then potentially sort of moving on and bigger investment and management teams. Many businesses fail at the diligence step because it proves during due diligence that actually the business is the owner and they're wedded into it. They're integrated into the operational processes. As you said before, they're sort of from the sort of CEO down to bottle washing. They do every single part of it. This would be a huge benefit for anybody who's either seeking investment or just had it, to make sure they don't fall into that trap as well.
Yes. And others that I've run across, family businesses that are looking to make a transition, between generations, where the elder generation started the business, had the roles that you're describing, are ready to set it up for transition to another family member or the next generation, looking for a little structure or infrastructure, not too much, obviously, but
Yeah.
to codify what they've built, or people seeking an exit of another kind, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, I think that just makes it useful for a whole different kind of audience that might be listening to this as well, where actually you think, well, I don't class myself as maybe the owner founder, but I could see a scenario in the future where I get held in the business longer than I wanted to because I'm too entwined into a delivery model or too entwined into a sales process. So I think that's, yeah. Okay, Sam, sort of entering the regular part of the podcast now, just sort of some quick fire questions. Just keep your answers short, sweet. First thing that pops into your head, but I think it's just great to get some initial reactions to things. So, ready?
I'm ready. Let's do
Let's
it.
go. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs when they're thinking about expanding globally?
I think it's getting real about how relevant your product or service is in those international markets. Sometimes people want to expand because it sounds great, but they haven't spent that time on, am I going to get traction in the market with what I offer?
So market fit,
Mm-hmm.
relative goal. Okay, don't like that. So what's your biggest learn in your career to date? And you can't say not working with me.
Stole my answer, Andrew. Someone once told me a story, which I'll spare you the long version of the story, but the punchline was you can choose to be right or you can choose to be helpful in different situations where your advice is asked, and that it's better to be helpful. You get more places, you get more interesting places when you're helpful than when you insist on being right.
The only reason I'm smiling is because I can see that in your working practice. You are one of life's great collaborators and facilitators. So, hey, good. Okay, keep it with the global feel. Then you work with businesses all over the world. Best nationality to collaborate with.
All of them. They're wonderful in all their different ways.
Yeah, we embrace all the different nuances and everything. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Okay. What would be your top advice to entrepreneur, whether domestically or globally? Just start out running that business. Just top tip.
Sure. For me, get on that journey, spending time to get to know yourself and what you're genetically encoded to do better than anybody else. So what were you put on this earth to do? And then once you've got that figured out, like work on building infrastructure to delegate everything else. Ultimately, if you get there, you're going to be happier, you'll be more fulfilled, your company is going to flourish. Personally, you're going to get a lot of satisfaction as well. I think know thyself is sort of what I'm saying, and not often practiced enough.
I like that. I like the delegate activities as well. I've been asked a similar version of this question. Lots of my careers as I've dealt with the global flexible workforce and then the businesses, and I have a slightly different take on it, which is if you're ever doing a task that you can't charge a client for, stop. As an entrepreneur, every waking hour has to be on driving growth and revenue for your business. And if it's not, outsource it, delegate it, get some, that's what the little thing so I like that sort of ties into them both. And I've certainly resonated with me a lot of what you said today, and I'm sure it will with the audience, both across people at early stages of the business journey, people that are sort of knee deep into global expansion now, whether they're starting on the sort of the private equity investment cycle. Lots of useful stuff in here today. If there's anybody here listening to this that says, I'd like to know more about that, how do I get in touch with Sam? What's the opportunities? How do they get in touch with Sam? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way is to send me an email. Obviously, you can find me elsewhere at LinkedIn, but just send me an email, sam.bryson@eosworldwide.com. And
we'll try and put that. I'll try and do it now. There you go. Let's see if we can get that to happen. Try and put it there.
Beautiful. You're a wizard, Andrew.
Okay, so LinkedIn, email, failing that, if anybody messages us, we'll pass that on to Sam as well. But I would wholeheartedly suggest reaching out if any of that resonated today. I don't think people will be disappointed by that. So let me try and recap. EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, a way of equipping businesses to sort of be more strategically aligned, operationally aligned, and culturally aligned through a really simplistic framework. And you, Sam, offer a service to sort of facilitate and curate that through leadership teams to be able to sort of get people to understand it, but not just understand it and have it as something that we've all done throughout our management career. We've all been on management training courses and then gone home the day after and not done anything about it. This is different, isn't it? This is actually you change the way you think, act, behave, and hold each other accountable.
Absolutely. And there are things, I think the audience will appreciate, and you have already, these aren't rocket science things, right? They're concepts that have been around for a while. And my job is to teach the tools in the process and then let folks run their businesses. I'm not trying to create a dependent relationship or anything like that. It's to help first in that way and get them on the right journey for them.
Yeah. Okay. Sam, I've really enjoyed that. And one, it's just always nice to reconnect, but genuinely, I think there were a lot of moments during that conversation where I thought back to various businesses in my career. I was definitely guilty of that. I've seen other people guilty of that, and wow, I should probably think about adopting that in the future. And if it has for me, I'm sure it will for lots of our audience. And before we let you go, any final thoughts, any other things that you'd like to share?
Just to say thank you, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to reconnect with you and have a chance to catch up. I enjoyed our time working together and was sad when we went our separate ways, but good to be reconnected in this way and love watching what you're doing.
Always
thank you
a pleasure.
for having me.
No, not a problem. Our pleasure. So thank you very much, everyone. Please do reach out to Sam if that is of interest. And until next time, everyone, keep pushing beyond borders. Thank you.